Holy look up.
Oh my God. Oh.
They got red.
That is
Wow,
so...
look at the flash.
That is beautiful.
Oh my God.
The Cheals weren't supposed to be contenders this season. On paper, they were the underdogs, short on gear, short on cash, and barely keeping their claim alive. But when pressure mounts, some families crumble, and others double down. The Cheals chose the latter. Instead of pulling back, they risked everything on one audacious move, staking not only their reputation, but their future on a gamble so daring that even seasoned miners shook their heads in disbelief. Every shovel of dirt, every hour of overtime, every sleepless night led them into uncharted territory. Rumors spread fast, whispers of a discovery, of numbers that didn't add up, of gold too rich to be ignored. Rivals started paying attention, locals started watching, and soon it wasn't just a mining operation, it was a high-stakes showdown no one could look away from. By the time the dust settled, the Cheals had turned whispers into headlines and risk into a result so staggering it shook the valley. What they pulled out of the ground wasn't just gold, it was a windfall that rewrote their entire season. And if you want to see exactly how they pulled it off, hit like and subscribe, because the story you're about to witness is nothing short of staggering. The shack is quiet except for the hiss of a lantern. Papers scatter across the table, ledgers, maps, and the raw numbers that dictate survival. Fuel costs spiking, equipment repair overdue, a mountain of debt growing taller than any pile of pay dirt they've hauled this year. Around the table, voices rise and fall. The elders warn caution. This ground will bleed you dry. But the younger Cheals aren't hearing it. To them, hesitation is already death. Their season is slipping, and the Yukon never waits. Arguments cut deep, words like blades in the dim light. But beneath the fighting lies one unshakable truth. The Cheals aren't just risking money, they're risking legacy. History in this land remembers bold men, the ones who gambled everything, struck rich, and carved their names into the annals of Yukon lore. But it remembers the failures too, the nameless, frozen bodies buried alongside dreams that never saw sunlight. The air grows heavy, a decision hanging like a noose. Finally, one voice cuts through. At dawn, we dig. Morning breaks, cold and merciless. The first excavator roars to life, steel jaws tearing into ground untouched for centuries. Each bucket rises dripping with earth, a gamble in metal and mud, and crashes into the sluice with the weight of dice thrown on a table stacked against them. The valley shudders with the sound, a metallic heartbeat echoing through frost-stiffened air. But the ground remains silent. Pan after pan yields nothing but mud, gravel, and disappointment. The men mutter grim stories, claims that swallowed entire crews, leaving behind only rusted machines and broken men. Hours blur into days, and every tank of diesel burned feels like another nail in their coffin. Tension grips the air tighter than the frost. Brothers snapping at each other, one demanding they pull out before they bankrupt themselves, the other shouting that the streak is just below their feet. Faith and fury collide in the dust of the cut, and for a moment it feels like the family might fracture before the ground gives up a single ounce. Then, in the dim light of another endless night shift, the earth whispers. A streak of black sand glimmers in the pan, subtle but unmistakable, like an omen drawn in ash. For some, it's a warning. Black sands have led miners to ruin before. For others, it's a promise. The Cheals lean closer, eyes reflecting the dim sparkle of flakes, no larger than a grain of salt, yet powerful enough to ignite fire in weary hearts. One of the elders remembers a legend whispered among old-timers, sleeper streaks, ground that looks barren until the moment it explodes with wealth, catching even seasoned miners off guard. Skeptics scoff, muttering about false signals and wasted effort, but the Cheals can feel it. The shift in the dirt, the whisper of something alive just beneath the surface. For the first time in weeks, hope flickers like fire against the frozen dark. The ground is no longer silent. It's speaking, and hope, once lit, never stays contained. The earth's whisper becomes a murmur in camp, then a rumor on the wind, slipping beyond their tarps and fires into places it doesn't belong. Gold always has a way of announcing itself, whether men want it to or not. Word spreads faster than gold dust in the wind. A stranger's truck parked too long at the ridge. The flash of binocular glass in the sun. The feeling of being watched from shadows just beyond the tree line. The Cheals know the signs. This isn't paranoia. The Yukon doesn't keep secrets for long, and already whispers are racing downriver. The family is onto something big. Around the campfire, voices grow tense. Reports trickle in from friends, from passing truckers, from old hands who've seen this game before. Tony Beets' spotters are out there, circling, waiting. No one says his name at first, but everyone feels it. The Viking of the Yukon doesn't need to swing a pickaxe to take ground. He just waits, bides his time, and then makes a lowball offer on a claim the second it shows promise. A move like that could erase the Cheals overnight, grinding their bold gamble into dust. The response is swift. Floodlights are shrouded with tarps to keep the glare from carrying across the valley. Night shifts are doubled. Machines roaring under the cover of darkness. Mats cleaned in silence, with only the hiss of water filling the night air. Paydirt is hauled, then buried again under canvas and rock before dawn. By daybreak, the site looks barren, as if nothing has been touched. But every man working those hours feels it in his chest, that they're not just fighting the ground anymore. They're fighting wolves circling in the dark, hungry for a kill. Paranoia creeps in. Every unfamiliar vehicle rattling down the gravel road feels like a threat. Every stranger's glance in town feels like a knife slipped between the ribs. Even within the family, tensions rise. Arguments flare over who left a light unmasked, who let their guard drop, who might have spoken too loosely at the fuel depot. The Yukon has always demanded secrecy, but now it feels like the Cheals are guarding not just gold, but a secret war already in motion. And still, the ground doesn't care. Machines groan day and night, every ounce of dirt wrestled from the cut, demanding more than the last. Their old wash plant has become the heart of the gamble, and it's a fragile one. Bolts rattle loose, gears grind, the structure shivers under strain like an exhausted beast. Welders crouch under dripping tarps, sparks showering into the mud as they patch cracks that should have been retired years ago. Every breakdown costs fuel. Every pause costs time. And in the Yukon, time is money. Then disaster nearly strikes. A pump bursts with a shriek, water exploding across the pit and turning the cut floor into a boiling flood. A worker is swept from his feet, flailing toward the wash as the torrent roars. Shouts rip the air, bodies dive into the waist-deep surge, dragging him back seconds before the current swallows him. For a heartbeat, the entire gamble hangs by a thread. One life, one machine, one pump, standing between survival and ruin. The plant coughs back to life after frantic repairs, but the fear lingers. Everyone knows it now. This isn't sustainable. The Cheals press on anyway, eyes red and swollen, hands split open with blisters and oil burns, faces hollowed by exhaustion. Meals blur into mouthfuls of cold beans, eaten beside engines still running. Sleep is stolen in hour-long bursts, helmets used as pillows in the mud. The plant becomes more than steel and bolts, it is breath itself. If it runs, they run. If it dies, so do they. And then, after weeks of torment, the ground finally cracks. At first it's a glimmer, just a shard of gold, lodged in the mats, glittering faintly beneath the wash water. Someone leans closer, disbelief hardening into awe. Then another, then another. Chunky nuggets, rough and jagged, cling to the carpet like stars, pried from the night sky. The roar that erupts drowns out the machinery. Men shout, some laugh uncontrollably, others fall to their knees, weeping openly in the spray. It's real, not just flakes, not just promises in the black sands. Nuggets, proof undeniable that the gamble has teeth, that all the nights spent under tarps, the bruises, the blood, the paranoia, weren't madness. They were steps toward this moment. Hope ignites into fury. Work intensifies, hands moving faster, eyes sharper. Every tray of concentrate, every ounce pulled from the mats feels like another victory wrested from a land that has killed thousands of dreams before theirs. They're not just miners anymore. They're soldiers, fighting a battle against Earth and rival alike. And for once, the Earth is bleeding gold. But even celebration carries its shadow. In the distance, the ridge is empty, where the spotters once sat. Their silhouettes vanished like smoke. Scouts don't vanish because they lost interest. They vanish because they have enough to report back. The Cheals know it instantly. Their secret is gone. Someone else knows. Rivals will move, and when they do, this $102,000 gamble could turn from fortune to battlefield in a heartbeat. The gold is gathered, boxed, locked, hidden as if it were contraband smuggled through enemy lines. Guards take shifts, sleeping with rifles within arm's reach, listening for engines on the road, watching for lights in the tree line. The nuggets gleam under lamplight in their boxes, heavy, undeniable, and yet fragile in their promise. Proof of victory, but also a beacon calling enemies closer. The Cheals sit in silence at last, staring at what they've pulled, listening to the machines cooling in the dark, and they all feel it pressing down. The Yukon has given them its first taste. But the question that none of them dares voice is simple and terrifying. What will it demand in return? The answer comes not in whispers, but in thunder. The air thickens, heavy with the strange stillness that precedes violence, as if the land itself has paused to inhale. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a low growl begins to roll, closer, closer, until it feels like the very ground is speaking back with fury. The sky blackens without warning. Clouds roll in thick and low, swallowing the last light of day, as if the Yukon itself has decided the Cheals have taken enough. A wall of rain slams into the valley, icy shards of hail driven sideways by winds strong enough to rattle the frames of excavators. The roar of the storm drowns the engines, sluices clogging instantly with mud that churns and spills over in waves of brown water. Paydirt turns to choking slush, washing back into the cut faster than it can be hauled out. The very walls of the pit begin to sag and ooze, streaks of water carving dangerous veins into the earth. The crew scrambles. Chains are thrown over machinery to anchor them in place, bodies straining in the freezing torrent as gusts threaten to tip over the excavators like children's toys. Tarps flap violently in the wind, tearing loose, and men dive to catch them before they vanish into the storm. Tools sink into mud, hoses vanish under rising pools of water, and the camp itself begins to flood. Inside the tents, bedding is soaked through, food supplies spoiled as icy water seeps into containers. Nights become a blur of wet, sleepless hours. Fires sputter out in the rain, leaving the crew huddled together under whatever dry canvas remains. The cold gnaws at bones, muscles ache from the relentless fight to hold ground against nature itself. Morale plummets, faces hollow with exhaustion, eyes ringed with black. Yet even as the storm pounds them into the mud, no one quits. Around the small circle of light, cast by a single surviving lantern, words pass between chattering teeth. This is the Yukon's test. Every miner knows the ground never gives its treasure without sacrifice. The storm is not punishment, they tell themselves. It is the price of admission. When the skies finally break, it is not silence that follows, but the roar of engines returning to life. The Cheals strike back with fury, refusing to let the storm bury them. Floodlights blaze against the night, illuminating a valley transformed into a fortress of machines. Excavators, dozers, and pumps thunder back into motion, mud flying in every direction as if the crew themselves are clawing revenge out of the earth. The storm may have tried to bury them, but now they are relentless. Every pan pulled from the cut shimmers with promise. Not just flakes now, but nuggets thick enough to weigh down calloused palms, their jagged edges catching the light like shards of frozen fire. Each discovery sets off a ripple of renewed determination. Family members who once whispered doubts now dare to whisper numbers. 6 figures, maybe more, if the streak holds. Even as exhaustion grinds their bodies into the dirt, adrenaline drives them. Meals are skipped, sleep forgotten. The men move like shadows under the glare of floodlights, hands raw, backs bent, eyes locked on the sluices as though hypnotized by the glitter they reveal. The ground trembles under the constant assault. Engines pound, shovels tear, sluices roar with the weight of endless paydirt. It feels unstoppable, an avalanche of labor meeting an avalanche of fortune. Yet the land itself seems to groan in warning, as if the Yukon resents their speed, their hunger, their refusal to pause. The cut walls drip with water, seams widening, gravel shifting with ominous creaks. The warning is there, but in the rush of victory, no one listens. Then the earth gives way. It starts as a groan, a deep rumble rising from beneath their boots, followed by the sharp crack of stone splitting under strain. Eyes snap up, hearts freezing, as an entire section of the cut wall shudders, then collapses. Tons of gravel, mud, and boulders crash down in an avalanche, engulfing the lower trench in seconds. Machinery screeches to a halt, alarms blaring, shouts cutting through the chaos as men scatter from the falling earth. 2 crewmen are caught in the collapse, their screams swallowed by the roar of stone and slurry. Panic ignites. The rest of the crew charges into the choking dust and spray, clawing with shovels, picks, even bare hands, throwing aside rocks and mud in a frantic scramble. Minutes stretch into eternity as the wall of debris towers above them, threatening to spill even more. Finally, gasping and battered, the 2 trapped men are dragged out, their bodies slick with mud, coughing but alive. Relief floods the crew, but it is short-lived, because amid the rubble lies something undeniable. The collapse has torn through a pocket of paydirt richer than anything they've seen before. Veins of gold glint between jagged rocks, shining even in the murky water, mocking the danger that nearly killed them. The Cheals stare at it, awe and dread mixing in equal measure. The earth has shown them its treasure, but it demanded blood to do it. Now the truth is inescapable. Every ounce they pull from this ground comes at a price. Riches lie within arm's reach, but so does ruin. The Yukon has given them proof of fortune, tangled inseparably with the risk of death. And still, despite the collapse, despite the near loss of life, the fire in their eyes doesn't dim. If anything, it burns brighter, because they've seen it now. The Yukon has shown them what waits just below the surface, and no storm, no rival, no collapse will keep the Cheals from clawing it out, no matter the cost. That fire follows them inside. The weigh-in chamber had never felt like this before, every wall dripping with condensation, every breath held so long, lungs ached. The air reeked of diesel, sweat, and the faint metallic tang of freshly washed gold. Trays lined the benches like offerings in a sacred ritual, each one heaving under the wet, gritty weight of pay, dirt refined down to treasure. When the first scoop hit the scale, silence swallowed the room. The old beam creaked, counterweights clinking as the needle slid, then settled. 10,000. The number felt like a spark in a powder keg. Nobody clapped, nobody shouted. They just stared. Every dump that followed became thunder in their chests. 20,000. 30. 50. With each rise, doubt peeled away like frost melting under sun. The Cheals had bet everything, and now the Yukon itself seemed to acknowledge them. Each number, each click of iron against iron, slammed into their ribs like a war drum. By the time the scale tipped past 70,000, hands trembled, jaws clenched so tight teeth ached, eyes wet with something nobody dared call tears yet. The ground had given, but how much more? When the last tray came forward, a hush rippled over the crew, thicker than the Yukon fog. The elder Cheel laid it down, as though setting a crown on velvet. Gold winked beneath the harsh floodlights, dense and certain, impossible to mistake. The final counterweight slid across the scale, each metallic, scrape dragging eternity with it. 90, 95. The numbers ticked higher, every pound a roar inside their skulls. And then, there it was, $102,000. The scale froze, its arms steady and true. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, it broke like a dam. Shouts, sobs, fists slamming tables until wood cracked. Exhaustion, fear, and doubt dissolved in a single explosion of triumph. The Cheals had pulled their greatest payday out of a cut everyone else would have called suicide. They hugged like men drowning in joy, kissed their fists, tossed helmets in the air. Outside, the Yukon sky burned with midnight fire, the northern sun barely skimming the horizon, painting the valley in molten gold to mirror the metal in their hands. For the first time in years, the Cheals weren't scraping by. They were roaring into history, victors on the blood-soaked stage of Yukon gold. And yet, even in celebration, the shadows stretched long. Word would spread faster than wildfire. Rivals already circling like wolves now had the scent of blood and fortune. Debt collectors, landmen, corporate vultures, every one of them would see the Cheals as prey fattened for the slaughter. Around the fire that night, cups clinked, voices shook with laughter, but behind every smile lurked a sharpened edge of fear. The family toasted their windfall, their arms draped across one another, but their eyes flicked to the tree line, half expecting headlights or silhouettes in the dark. The Yukon had taught them well. Fortune never came alone. It dragged hunger and envy in its wake. Still, for a brief and fragile moment, they let themselves feel it. Victory. They weren't just miners anymore. They were contenders. The Yukon had acknowledged them. But the Yukon never forgets, and it never forgives without balance. The land whispered warnings in the creak of pines in the restless rush of swollen rivers. Every fortune here was bought with a toll: lives, blood, or sanity. The Cheals were now a part of that legacy, their names etched into the mud beside giants and ghosts. Around the fire, oaths were sworn. They would defend what they'd earned. They would not bow to Beets, nor sell out to the vultures. The gold in their strongboxes was not just wealth. It was blood, sacrifice, and the proof that their family name belonged in the Yukon's brutal song. Yet greed is a storm that no oath can stop. Rivals were already plotting. The claim was now a beacon, daring every desperate man within 100 miles to test his fate against it. The Cheals' triumph was no ending. It was the opening shot of a war the Yukon itself seemed eager to watch unfold. The $102,000 haul glittered in the dark like contraband, heavy as destiny. The Cheals held it tight, knowing deep down it was not victory they cradled, but the first battle prize of a long, merciless war. The Yukon had given, yes, but it had also marked them, and soon it would come to collect. If you've been hooked by this journey, by the sweat, the risk, and the triumph, don't miss what comes next. Every win sparks a new war. Every strike ignites fresh greed, and the Cheals fight is far from over. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications to follow the next chapter of this high-stakes Yukon saga. Because in the world of gold mining, fortune favors the bold, but only the ruthless survive.